testing out our endpoint. In this module, we're going to be testing everything that we've currently set up. We're going to send a couple fake readings to the API, and then we're going to check the MariaDB database. Then we're going to retrieve records from the API as well. And we'll also plug in our Raspberry Pi to the API and start reading actual real data. For this module, you're going to need some software to perform these tests. You will need something like Postman to send HTTP commands to the API, and then something to view the MariaDB database. Or you can do all of these things from the prompt if you know how. The first thing we'll want to do is let's set up our API service. I'm SSH'd into the endpoint machine right now. And I'll type in python api.py to start up the service. And now I have Postman loaded up here, and I'm going to set up some data and then send that to that URL. In my case, the URL is going to be internetofthings.jeremymorgan.com with a port of 5000 and then /weather/API/v1/readings. If you've set up the routes the way that we set it up in the earlier modules, all you'll have to change on this is the URL that you're going to. And now I'm going to send it a post. So I'll want to switch the following button. We'll click on the tab that says body, and we want to select raw because we're going to be sending this raw data. Now, as you can see, I've put in a JSON object here with temp1, temp2, temp average, pressure, sea level pressure, and humidity. These are all fake values for now that we're just going to use to test out the data functionality of this. Now I'll need to set the type to JSON. That way the server knows what kind of data is coming in. And now we'll press send. Now if we scroll down here, we can see that we have the status of succeeded. That means it successfully entered something into the database, according to our API. So let's go ahead and open up the database just to verify that. Now I have my MariaDB database opened up here with MySQL Workbench. And what I'll do is select star from weather.reading. And as you can see, our fake values have indeed been inserted into the database. Now going back to Postman, let's go ahead and create a GET request to see if the API is going to be returning the data as well. Okay, and now I've sent a GET request to that same URL, and as you can see, there's a JSON object with the fake objects that we inserted earlier. Let's switch back to this tab and let's press it a couple more times. We'll return back to the API tab, and as you can see, the record's been inserted multiple times. So we can see that we've taken a fake JSON object, sent it in, it's being inserted into the database, and now the API is extracting it back out of the database. This is the exact functionality that we're looking for. So let's send it some real data. Okay, now I'm back here on my Raspberry Pi, and I've done a few things to the script just for testing purposes. I've commented out the actual send to the URL, and I have it so it prints out URL data so that we can see the JSON string that will be sent to the server. Then I have it say print will send to make sure it's sending it to the right URL. And then we'll print with headers, and we'll print out the headers to make sure that those are all correct. And now let's go ahead and run the file. As you can see here, it appears the JSON is good. We've got real values from our sensors. It will send to internetofthings.jeremymorgan.com:5000, just exactly as we want it to, and with headers, keep alive, and content type. So everything looks good here, so let's go ahead and send it for real. And everything looks good here, so let's go ahead and send it for real. Okay, so now we're back on our Raspberry Pi, and we're going to run that sensor script, and we're going to send actual data into our endpoint. We'll do that by typing in sudo python readings.py. And it comes back blank, so let's go ahead and take a look at our database. Now here I'm going to do select star from weather.reading again. Voila, real data. These are actual values that are coming from a sensor that's sitting on the Raspberry Pi in my kitchen right now. So let's go ahead and hit the API with a GET request and see if it's coming through the API as well. Okay, and I've got Postman loaded up here, and let's go ahead and send a GET to the endpoint. And there it is. Real data, real values, straight from the sensors into the endpoint and then back out of the endpoint again. Let's go ahead and send it a few more times by pressing up and then enter. Let's go check out our database. And as you can see, it's working. Now let's go back to our endpoint really quick in Postman and check that out. Okay, now before we had one record that came back. Now let's go ahead and press send again. And we've got multiple records. So now let's try the last piece of functionality, which is selecting an individual ID. Now, as you can see, the second to the last one is reading ID 69. So let's go ahead and try to grab that. And what I've done is I've changed readings to reading, and then we've done /69, which is the ID that we want to get. Okay, now what I've done is I've taken and appended onto the end of that URL where it says /readings, and I've appended the ID of 69. And when I press send, you can see that I get number 69. Let's change that to 70. And now we get the next reading in line. As you can see, we now have real data going in and out, connected to real sensors. This is true IoT right here. In this module, we tested out our API and verified its functionality by sending some data to it, reading that data back, and then checking our MySQL database to verify it. We then connected our Raspberry Pi to the API and started sending it real data. We then pulled that real data back out of the API again, and we're able to grab a whole group of them or just select an individual ID. In this module, I hope I've showed you how easy it is to get this all put together. With just a little bit of time and a little bit of practice, you'll be able to build massively awesome APIs and endpoints all over the place. Now next, let's take that data that we're putting in and let's visualize it a little bit.